good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. A pleasure. Thanks so much, Kimberly, for the introduction. We're going to do this a little different tonight. It's going to be a little bit more fun. It's going to be a little bit more witty than maybe usually it is, but we'll try and keep it just as knowledgeable along the way. So bear with me on that. As Kimberly has already said, if you have any questions at all, please shoot them into the chat or into the Q&A. I do these kind of workshops on a not daily basis. It's not that bad, but on a regular basis. And from experience, I can say it's usually nicer to have the questions in the moment where they arise rather than having them all at the end. So please feel free to fire away. I have been told to do about 40 minutes, so that's exactly what we're going to aim for, and include any questions in there that you might have. And obviously, if you don't get a chance to ask them today, or if you want to ask them in a smaller group or in a smaller context, then by all means, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email. There's no worries there at all if there's anything that's unclear. The topic has been announced through various channels, and Kimberly has been kind enough to just mention it one more time. So I'm not going to explain the topic into much more detail, and let's get right into it, because 45 minutes from experience fly by. So I think it's smarter if we just run through it and see how we do along the way. Marketing strategies for hotels. I will introduce myself briefly to at least justify the fact that we were invited, and that this, Kimberly didn't meet me randomly in the street and say, "Hey, you look like you know something about marketing." I do this for a living. So there is that. I run an online marketing agency out of Berlin, Germany, and we specialize in online marketing for hotels and hospitality companies. So we do have some street credibility to talk about these topics, and we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and we can safely say we do it around Europe, certainly, and in some cases even around the world these days. So this is our bread and butter, and it includes everything that you might think of in terms of online marketing, social media, websites, paid, performance, SEO, SEA. So all the stuff that influences where somebody books a hotel room, or books a flight, or books a rental car, or books a camping spot, or whatever your poison is when it comes to traveling. So that's kind of how we reached this, and the reason we co-branded this with Smack. I will get to that a little bit later down the road, because we've been fortunate enough to create something called the Smack Hospitality Podcast and the Smack Hospitality Media Company, which is started as a fun project because a colleague of mine, true story, said the infamous sentence, "Fritz, the only thing you're really good at is talking, so you might as well do something with it." So I will get into that story a little later, and show the context of Smack. And for those of you that are interested in the Hospitality Academy, I'll introduce the podcast briefly. And if you just can't get enough of my voice at the end of this, then I will show you a way to keep in touch with me, at least voice-wise, through the podcast. So I suggest we go for it and run it. We do very cool stuff here. That is not just a saying, but it's actually the truth. And I will explain what we do a little bit further down the road when I've got some examples for you. And we'll talk about, and we'll come back to this slide, what Smack is. We do pretty much everything that I'm about to share with you is based on a case study that is Smack. So effectively what we tried to do with Smack is we tried to reach companies in the hospitality industry that could potentially be clients for us, and we created a sub-brand to do so. So that's kind of the background behind Smack. And as you can see from the picture, it's all a little bit funny. It's all a little bit geeky. It's a little bit entertaining. That's kind of the idea. I'm going to skip this slide, first of all, because I hate the picture. And I will admit it's not my choice which picture goes here, because Marie, who's the colleague who's organized this, put this here. So I will skip this. If you are dying to know more, and this presentation is not meant to be about me, but it's more meant to be obviously about you guys and the topic. If you're dying to know more about me, then by all means do stalk me on LinkedIn. That's what the platform was made for. You can type in my first and my last name to LinkedIn, and there's no second one. So you'll find me right away, and feel free to connect. But I'm going to skip everything that I've done. I can probably claim for myself I've been around the block and back in hospitality. So I will leave it at that. When we talk about marketing, and when we talk about strategies, especially for hotels, obviously we want to talk about the traveler, because that's ultimately who we target when we talk about marketing strategies for hotels, right? We talk about people who travel, who want to go from one place to another and need a home away from home for a given period of time. Sometimes that's short, sometimes it's a night, maybe two. If we're talking about business travelers, then it's usually somewhere in the ballpark between 1 to 3 nights. And if we're talking about leisure, then obviously the traveler is a little bit of a different persona, because then we're talking about slightly more nights, usually in the ballpark somewhere between 3 and 7, 8 is kind of a good average. It depends a little bit on where you are in the world, what that average might be. And when you look at strategies, there's especially in today's world, and this has gotten worse because I started this company when the internet age and the digital age was really starting to hit hard, and social media was coming along, which was around 2014, 2015. So we've seen a massive shift in strategy, in the word strategy, right? Because the word strategy, if you ask somebody to define strategy for you, you usually get very interesting and very amusing answers. So let's take the strategy part of this workshop above all. And the one thing I think that anybody who works in some form of managerial role, the one thing everybody will agree on is a strategy usually includes some form of goal. Right? You usually are aiming to do something. That can be what we call a quantitative goal, which is something that has to do with numbers, a numeric goal of some sort. It could be a qualitative goal, which is a soft skill goal, for example, or something along those lines. But usually there's a goal of some sort involved. And when we look at that, the goals here are clearly, when we look at the modern traveler, to increase sales. That's ultimately the goal. You want to sell your overnight, you want to sell your hotel room, and there's obviously different ways to do that, and brand awareness. And when you do set your goals, you want to make sure that they're somewhat measurable. And obviously measurability is something that certainly in the recent day and age, with all the different analytical tools that there are available, whether that's for website or social or revenue management, measurable has certainly become a topic. And yet there's a research study that's actually not been too long ago in Europe, it was back in 2022, that said about 90% of hotels in Europe don't have measurable goals set in their yearly strategies, which I find strikingly bizarre. I'm not going to complain, because it's what I earn money with, the fact that there are no measurable goals, because then they ask companies like us to set them. But it's obviously, if you think about it, if this was any other industry, let's take, I don't know, retail, for example, there's very, very strict measurable goals in retail, and something that we're yet to see in hospitality. So the question is, what do you want to reach? You could do a lot of different things there. Market research. We all love doing market research studies in university. I know we all miss it dearly. Some of you might still be in university, so you might still be doing it. It's heaven and hell in one, right? It's hell because somebody has to sit down and physically do it. And there's no AI, there's no chat GPT yet that will do it to the extent that you need it. Trust me, I've tried. So there is still some components there where you need to do it manually, and it's heaven on the other hand, because obviously it's what gives you the data and the possibilities to take decisions afterwards. So research clearly a key part when it comes to defining strategies. And then obviously comes the bread and butter of our business, which is target audiences. Who am I trying to target? Who is my traveler? And the good news is there is more data available in today's world. We are, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what your perspective is on this, in a day and age where secrets are very difficult to keep. And that goes as much for the digital landscape as it goes for anywhere else. There's a lot of data on people, on personas available now, again, for better or worse. Yes, there is some rules and regulations in some countries, rules and regulations. If you are joining us from Europe, in terms of data protection, clearly something you might have heard. There's something called the GDPR in Europe. Other parts of the world, let me tell you, they don't give a damn about these things yet. So there's very big differences we can see there, and that's why the good news is here for us in the business of creating personas, there's a lot of very specific data we can target now, right? If I were to target a traveler that's between 25 and 30, I can no longer just sort him or her by age. There's a million other different possibilities I can sort him or her by. The obvious ones being income, the obvious ones being willingness to travel, the obvious ones being interests. Is somebody interested more in sustainability? Is he interested more in luxury? Is he more interested in budget travel? So there's a lot of things there that we can do now, and never before. And certainly, I can apply this to what we do here at the agency at Studio 49. Never before have we been doing as many personas as we have in the recent, I'm going to say, 2 years, because there's so much data available, because there's such an audience available. I'm going to say if you don't know your personas, and a persona can never be just one, right? If you run a hotel, if you're in the hotel business, if you're in tourism, it doesn't even have to be a hotel. You're never ever going to have one target group. That's never ever going to happen. Okay, never say never, right, James Bond? But in very rare cases where you have only one persona, unless you're a if you're a downtown hotel in London, right by Heathrow Airport, okay, clearly I get that you might have one very major persona and then maybe two or three others that don't matter as much. But other than that, with very few exceptions, you're going to have multiple personas that you want to target. And my question to the hotels in that case will always be, how well do you know your personas? Do you have, and make it childish. Call them Jim, Jesse, and Jason, and tell me exactly what does Jim do, what does he want? What does Jesse do? What does Jason do? Make it recognizable, not just for yourself as the manager, also for your team, right? Because you have somebody who puts these strategies then into place. Well, then make it recognizable for them. And then in a meeting, you can always say, what about Jesse? How's Jesse doing? Are we getting enough Jessies into the hotel? Are we getting enough Jasons into the hotel? Are we getting enough? I forget the third one. Jeff, whatever I said. Are we getting enough Jeffs into the hotel? You see what I mean? Make it tangible, make it fun. And I think that comes a long way in that regard. Now, let's pause and say, okay, Fritz, you've given us a great presentation. You're smiling. You're telling jokes into the camera. Give me some meat on the bone. Who's the modern traveler? What does he want? What does he like? What is he interested in? Well, here's bad news. I'm going to give you the strict consulting answer. And that depends. Yeah, that depends, because the modern traveler is not just one modern traveler. There is a variety of modern travelers, and never has travel been as full of variety as it is today, for simple reasons. I'll give you some examples that you probably all know, but maybe never thought about. Travel, if we go back to, let's say, the 80s, 90s, travel was a luxury commodity. It was expensive to travel, and not everybody was able to travel. Well, guess what? There is people that travel from the UK to Germany on a Ryanair flight Friday night for €9. There we go. I think somebody muted me. I unmuted myself again. I'm back. Kimberly, was that you? I'm looking at you. No? Okay. So what I was trying to get at is travel is no longer a luxury commodity. Travel is pretty much available at a certain price for anybody. Again, the Ryanair example being somebody can travel from London to Berlin for a weekend, for a fun weekend, at just €10 a flight, and then have a good time here. So the times have changed where travel was only available to a select few, and clearly in those times it was much easier to target a certain target group. Now, with travel being available to so many more people, you need to do a little bit more homework in terms of who are you trying to target and who are you trying to look at. And then we have interests, and interests are pretty much the worst thing that ever happened to the hotel industry, because the world is more connected now. The people love doing certain things. You might be into sustainability, you might be into beaches, you might be into pools, you might be into hiking, you might be into chilling by the beach, you might be into cocktails, you might be into steak, you might be into vegan. Okay, it took me probably 5 seconds to list 10, 15 different interests there. The interests are the worst thing that ever happened to the hotel industry, because all of a sudden people have choice, and choice and variety make it much more difficult to target them, right? Because people might have even more than a select few interests. Some of you might have 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 interests when you travel. Well, guess what? That's not easy to target as your hotel or as your accommodation, who I want you to spend money with me in my establishment. So it's gotten more complicated for sure. And the modern traveler is not a select few. It's many, many, many people. And certainly now after COVID, with the bounce back after COVID, and I made it a point to this year no longer in any of the workshops that I give talk about COVID anymore. And I've done well so far, so I will not talk about COVID much more. But certainly after COVID, we've seen a bounce back of travel, and probably stronger than 2019 of pre-COVID. So there's even more people, even more interest out there today traveling. That being said, let's talk about the elephant in the room that you always want to look at when you talk about strategies, and that is, who are you competing with? Okay, you need to know, and there's a saying that works very well, especially in marketing: keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Okay, you want to know what your competition is up to, who they are. And I can't begin to explain to you how often I've walked into meetings and said, okay, we've got the strategy, this and that, and so on and so forth. Let's talk about your competitors and who they are and what they do. And the answer I got was silence. Yeah. If you don't know who you're competing against and what they're doing, then you don't know how to optimize your own strategy to the point where it helps. Right. So you want to understand, you don't want to fish necessarily in the same pond as 6 or 7 of your competitors are currently already fishing. Right. Go find your own pond. And yes, again, that might not always apply. If you're into business travelers, again, London Heathrow, the example I just gave, then obviously you need to compete in the London Heathrow pond, and there's going to be other people fishing, right? But if it's not that straightforward, try and be creative about the way you go about managing where you target, and try and understand who your competitors are targeting and try and avoid that, because otherwise you're drawing your own prices for acquisition up higher than you need to be. Cost of acquisition, COA, cost of acquisition, one of the most underrated KPIs in modern marketing, especially in hospitality. How much are you spending to reach the guest that you want to have in your hotel on average? Right? How much are you spending to get Kimberly to travel to your hotel? How much are you spending to get, Kimberly's friend and so on and so forth into your hotel? And that might differ, right? It might be more expensive to get traveler A into your establishment rather than traveler B. So cost of acquisition, something that you definitely need to be looking at when we talk about marketing strategies. I feel like this is a slide that in a context like this, I just need to show, just so I've said some smart stuff. I'm not going to explain this because you all know what a SWOT analysis is: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Clearly something that you want to do. What is your product like? Where is it strong? Where is it weak? Don't pretend like your product doesn't have any weaknesses. That's not the truth. Our agency has weaknesses, and I'm very happy admitting that, and we know that, and we try and own them as best we can. So don't go out there and be naive and go and try and convince your guests you don't have any weaknesses. I guarantee you that you have some. At the same time, I would expect you to be able to tell me in any strategy meeting we have, what's your USP? Right? What are you particularly good at that is very difficult to replicate? Let's not forget that a USP should be something that is difficult to replicate. Okay, it's not something that if I have a hotel and Kimberly builds her hotel right next to me, she can replicate within 2 years of building her hotel. That's not a USP. Okay, that's an advantage, but not a USP. A USP, unique selling proposition, is something that is hard to replicate and unique to your offering. And if you don't have anything, that's not necessarily terrible. Again, depends on your product. Don't go overkilling it with trying to create a USP that might not necessarily be there. But if you have one, then by God, should it be strong.